We are officially live on YouTube for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. Today, we don't have the big guy, the GC with us, but we do have MTM, the Moments That Matter, our community manager in the house, Madison the Magnificent. Say hello, Madison.
Hello, everybody.
And she is going to be helping me through this recap, this people's history of Fortune Builders Ignite, where we are going to bring some folks that we met over the weekend that were at the real estate conference in Vegas with us. I'll give you a little recap from my end as well. And since we got to go and not everybody got to go, we're going to share the wisdom and share the love out here with the community. And if you're listening to us in the future here on the podcast or in YouTube post-show, go to nyais.com. Join us for one of our live shows. You can be part of the community and be part of a little tradition we have around here. You know what that is, right, Madison?
The roll call.
It's the roll call, everybody. We got our leadoff batter, John Hannon, kicking us off today, as he normally does, saying good afternoon. We got the MVP of the community, Lee Bishop, wishing everybody a good afternoon, everyone. We got the ringmaster of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Drew Barnhill. We got Leslie Wilson, who we're going to hear from in a little bit here, joining us from Williamsburg, Virginia. Leslie normally in Denver. I guess she's doing some work stuff in Williamsburg. Good to see you on here, Leslie, and good to see you in Vegas as well. We got Dean Curry, the early bird of the community in the house. Good afternoon from Columbus, Ohio. We got Nadeem Shah with his trademark good morning, good afternoon, JWB from the West Coast. We got Christopher Lee saying good afternoon to all from Fernandina Beach. Love me some Fernandina. We got the fairy godmother of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Jen Filzen, wishing everybody some greetings from the beautiful Monterey Bay, California. She says she's here with her notary public and signing all my documents to close on JWB property number 6. Yeah, let's go, Jen. I love that. Doing it live over here. We got the patriarch and matriarch of the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, Ken and Carolyn Moline. We salute you. Good to have you on board. We got Lewis Hudnell from the world famous Milpitas, California. I got to see Lewis in full Pittsburgh Steelers garb watching his team this weekend in Vegas. It was a magnificent sight, Lewis, and I commend you for a great victory. We got the other Greg Stone, the best Greg, saying howdy. Good to have you on board, Greg. There's something that's happening. When we send out the text to join the show and there's a link to come in, when you come in, you are listed as Not Your Average Guest. If you want to change your name, you got to click on the attendees and change your name, and you can. So we got a Not Your Average Guest checking in saying, good afternoon, JWB fam. Not sure who you are, but I'm assuming you're one of our great regulars here. We got Rosalind Riley, the regular Rosalind Riley, checking in. Good morning, everybody from Marietta, California. We got Vera Copeland from Hot Atlanta. Vera and I became friends here in Vegas this week. And we got Jeff Wonder, past wonder of the POTW, checking in with us from, I think he's still in Vegas, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff. He's going to be coming on to join us. So is Vera. Tell us a little bit about what they learned. We got another Not Your Average Guest saying Jersey. I'm guessing that's got to be Pedro Nacienzo based on how you spelled that. Who else we got in the house? All right. I think, we got Marilyn Kahneman from Homosassa, Florida, home of the manatees. And we got Into the Light, Aaron O'Neill. Aaron, I still owe you a last name, but I'm going to continue calling it Into the Light and continue the nickname joke. We got Misty Johnson, former star of the POTW from Denver as well. Good to have. This is a great roll call today. Eddie Harris from Atlanta. We got Bob Wiesner, my good friend, saying hi all. All right, man. This is a well-attended show. I love it. All right. So let's get right into it. I'm going to sprinkle in my own lessons from Fortune Builders Ignite. As you all know, I've been playing a real estate investor expert kind of on TV for the last 3 years, but you all know that my journey has been heavily influenced by just being in this room with you all, with Greg normally next to me. So the majority of my education has come from this show. And this Fortune Builders Ignite conference for me was a really great opportunity to become a little bit more well-rounded, right? While Fortune Builders, many of you know Fortune Builders, they're an educational platform about real estate. And many of you have come from that educational platform. You get educated on it. They teach you about passive investing. And then when it makes sense that you want to be in a growth market and invest in rental properties from a passive side, they send you over to JWB. So for me, since all of my education has been JWB, this was my time to basically interact with the rest of other investors that aren't really familiar with JWB, are doing other asset classes. And I learned something this time around. What I learned first that I had yet to really learn, that maybe some of you don't, I want to share this, is this rule of 72. It was a real big eye opener for me when they broke this thing down in the opening session. Basically, the rule of 72 states that if you take your IRR, if you take the number 72 and you divide it by your IRR, you get the amount of years until the investment that you make doubles. And as soon as they opened up my mind to that, as soon as they showed me that, I immediately went to the 3 properties that I have purchased in the last year and a half, right? And I've essentially I did the math, and I've essentially put about like $130,000 into properties, right? Into 3 properties as the down payment. And as I started doing the math on the rule of 72, with a very conservative estimate of a 12% IRR, my eyes started getting really big, right? The first calculation I did was that by 2028, I'm going to have 300K in equity, right? Then by 2032, I'm going to have 600K in equity. Then by 2040, I'm going to have 1.2 million. Then by 2046, I'm going to have 2.4 million. And then by 2052, I'm going to have 4.4 million. That's when I'm 72 years old. And that really, really just, I immediately called my wife, right? I was like, babe, like as somebody that's been in the rat race as an average investor, the majority of my life, the idea that I would get to a point where I was feeling like I was going to have a $4.4 million nest egg by the time that I was retired was very foreign to me. But now I'm really understanding this idea of like, it's always easy to say you want to wait to buy real estate, but it's better to buy real estate and wait. This idea that once I push those chips in, I don't know if by the time I'm 72, $4.4 million is what $4.4 million is today, but I know that I definitely need that much to retire. So it feels really, really good to have those chips in place. If you don't know the rule of 72, I wanted to share it with everybody, right? Take the number 72, divide it by the IRR of what your investment is. And that is how many years it's going to take for your capital to double. At 12% IRR, it's 6 years, right? So that's the math that I did. And then it doubles every single time. And as we all know, it's that compounding interest thing where the hockey stick goes up, because after a couple of times of doubling, once you get into the later years, that doubling is a huge, huge number. And I thought it was incredible. So that was my first takeaway. I hope that it's valuable for everybody. Right now, I want to bring on Brandon Thompson. You all have seen Brandon Thompson here on the show. He is one of the, Brandon, what is your title? What is your title exactly here at JW?
Yeah, no, I'm actually one of the sales executives. So, I'm the guy that you guys are going to be working with when you're expanding your portfolio or picking up your first property with us, your first group of properties. So, I'm going to be like your quarterback in essence of the onboarding process, making sure you understand Jacksonville. And then from there, having fun picking up your first couple properties.
Awesome, man. So I know that Brandon you've been on the show. You all have seen his face. Most of you have probably talked to him. Brandon, I know that you've gone to other Fortune Builders boot camps, but this was your first Ignite in person, man. What were did you learn anything in particular that you want to share with our community?
Yeah, I think it's 2 things. So not only what I learned, but it was almost like a big aha moment that, even in our community, the fact that we know Jacksonville very well, we know all the moving parts, we jump on the calls, we see you and Greg kind of do your thing every week. But it was eye-opening to see that, there are investors all across the country that just simply aren't aware of what's going on in Jacksonville. When I was telling a lot of clients about the fact that our price points are, even for new construction, 200, 250, I mean, their eyes just got so big because the idea of being able to buy a property in a market that's growing like ours was just so foreign. They're still trying to buy properties. I had one couple that was telling me that, just for them to get a distressed property that they would tear down would be 250. So for you to be able to get a brand new construction property in our market with the solid returns that we have, with the growth projections that we're looking at, that was just almost like an aha moment for me, is that we almost take it for granted that we're familiar with the market, familiar with all the different moving parts. But yeah, I think that was number one. But I think the other takeaway for me is, from my personal learning, it was definitely the rule of the 72, really breaking it down as in chunks versus looking at this mammoth of a goal that you have at the end of retirement, really just slowing it down and saying, you know what can I take step one, step two on a daily basis to start planting those seeds to get us to closer to retirement. So keeping it simple, but a very deliberate approach for me in my investment career has always been consistent, right? So anytime that I took a year off, guess what? I didn't get the biggest returns that I wish I would have got. So I think is regardless of what's going on in the market, making sure that we're consistent in our approach, consistently adding to the portfolio really is the key to success. I mean, it's hard to lose that way. So, and then the last thing is, because I get so excited talking about these things, is I get to see you guys. I'm typically on Zoom. I don't get a lot of personal interaction going through the computers. So it's good to get the hugs and shake the hands and, see families that, I've helped change your lives in a lot of different ways. I think we forget that, right? This is your real retirement, so I take it with pride. I have fun with it, but it's always good to meet you guys in person as well, guys.
Plenty of hugs to go around this weekend, man. As we learned that rule of 72, Brandon, you and I have had a lot of talks, and how you talk about like these homes are like singles, right? It's like getting on base. You make that baseball analogy. It's like you just got to get on base, and you got to get on base, and you got to get on base. Every once in a while, you're going to hit a home run. Everybody's going to get home, but you really need to get on base. And that rule of 72 really made that very clear to me, right? Like it's important to get on base as soon as possible in order to like get that thing to start compounding. I have something else to talk about with that later, man. But dude, I know that you're super busy. You have tons of calls from this weekend because everybody's interested in JWB Home. So I appreciate you being on, bud. Appreciate you being
guys. Bye-bye, guys.
Take care. All right. And up next is Max Needle, Max, you and me have met back here, but you have not met our community, right? You're another one of the business development guys here at JWB. Got to spend some really, really great time together, man, and really got to know you well. But why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and kind of give your takeaway if you got it?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to finally get to be on the show. It's like a dream come true for me. But yeah, so I'm also one of the sales executives over here, and kind of second what Brandon has to say too, is it was just so amazing to really get to meet so many of you guys and really get to really put some faces to the names and start these relationships together. And it was also my first Ignite. I had an absolute blast there, and just really grateful for the opportunity again to really get to meet so many incredible investors and find people from all walks of life. Some people beginning their journey, some people 5-10 years in, and a bunch of people working on their exit strategies too. So it was a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Max, you got a great story around kind of like knowing the show before you came to work at JWB, which I think is really cool. But, before we get into that, why don't you give me what your biggest takeaway was from the weekend?
Yeah. So there's really a couple, and one was a common theme that I heard of tons of people talking about the entire time, but really the thought that Warren Buffett really brought to everyone's attention, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. And, seeing so many people that, we hear about, all this national news of markets being all over the place, but just realizing that from the investor standpoint, this is the best time to be an investor, right? I mean, you're getting these discounts all over the place. So that was really cool to hear. And, just kind of that overwhelming sense of that, quote that I've heard many times in the past, but got to see it in action this weekend, which is really cool. And then secondly, I got to sit in on one of the Force Builders representatives, Paul Shively's presentation there, which where he really got an opportunity to 5x his portfolio, actually JWB portfolio, over 8 years, by really truly understanding and focusing on the growth component to it, right? I mean, so many people are so focused on just one of the cash flows or one of the profit centers, being cash flow, where 2/3 of his portfolio gains came from the other profit centers that are just working in the background, which is really, really cool, really, really powerful. And the real reason he was able to 5x his entire portfolio in such a short amount of time.
Man, I remember sitting with you during that presentation. We're both looking at each other like, dude, this is gold for our community, right? Like, Paul, the talk was how to 5x your rental property portfolio. And he basically went through a case study where by not focusing on cash flow, by focusing on a growth market, was it his father-in-law or his dad? It was his dad, right?
So it was his dad. And that was probably the most powerful part of the entire presentation. I mean, obviously 5x in your portfolio is really great, but just the emotional connection that he had to it. I remember him saying something, the better clarity of your why, the better clarity of your action. And his why was just so powerful. His father, wound up losing just about everything he had in his retirement savings during the Great Recession, being heavily invested in just stock markets and the S&P, which is the safest place to be, supposedly, came crashing down on him and really was starting all over again. And so Paul took that opportunity to build that real estate portfolio for his father and really take every single step and action with that in mind. So really having that why in front of you and making sure that it's clear and concise and something that you can continuously just keep in the front of your mind really made the difference for him. So I thought that was amazing too.
Love that, man. Before I let you go, you told me a story that really warmed my heart, man, about before you worked for JWB, kind of like listening to this show and then walking in and seeing the studio. I know you got a bunch of appointments because it was such a good weekend, but you want to kind of let everybody know about that?
No, it's worth it. It's worth it. So yeah, before I actually joined JWB, I was watching the show for probably about 6 months or so beforehand, but it was, almost a dream come true coming into this office. I had no idea that the podcast room was where it was. And I remember passing by and I was looking over, I felt like I was completely starstruck. Like, that's where the magic happens, like right in there. Finally, after a few weeks of just looking at it as I walked past, I took the initiative to actually stand in there and feel that vibe. And it was really cool. It was amazing. It was a surreal moment for me. But yeah, I've been a big fan of the show for a long time and love the opportunity that we got to have Pablo hanging out this weekend and really getting to know each other a little bit better. And it was just such a great time. It really was.
Likewise, bud. Likewise, man. I'll let you get back to work here, but I appreciate you making time to be here and share with the community. And welcome to your world premiere of the Not Your Average Investor Show on stage.
Sounds good. Hope to see you soon.
All right. Let's bring on Jeff. There he is, man. You may recognize Jeff as a star of a past POTW. He's out of New Orleans, a veteran. I think we spoke to you. I looked up our episode. It was like maybe 6 months ago. You were just kind of starting to get it settled in. And then we had some great conversations at the show, man. Welcome.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for having me. It's a good meeting you in person, because it's like meeting a celebrity in person for the first time. That's what you and everybody at JWB, you see them on there. There's a lot of stuff that I learned there, but I like to talk about our personal interaction. I got a chance to meet Pablo in like the foyer after, one of the courses, and real personal guy. And he shared with me a nugget because we started talking about networking. Where can I find like-minded people like I'm meeting at Ignite in my local city? And what you shared with me was go and find those volunteer at the local nonprofits or get involved with your local government leadership organizations. So that was like one of my key takeaways from the entire weekend. So I appreciate that.
Man, I was so happy to share that with you, Rad. And just to give everybody a little bit of context, this is an underrated piece of advice, right? I think most of us, when we're trying to build a new network in a new city, we'll go get involved in, natural for us is like go to RIA or go to something that is the same people from your industry. I found a lot of success in Miami volunteering for nonprofits. And the idea that you're like different in a room full of people instead of the same as like everybody else has a lot of value. And also the fact that most of the most influential people in town are generally on the boards of the biggest nonprofits. So it's like a backdoor into like a really, really high quality network of people that care at least a little bit about not just themselves. So I'm glad I got to share that with you, man. And I'm glad that you're going to go execute. How about on the real estate side, man? Anything else that you learned there that you can share?
I go with the profit centers. That was probably a good one for me too. I think I was on our podcast. I was like, I'm focused on the cash flow. It's all about the cash flow. But then you start looking at those other things, beating inflation, I finally got my taxes done for this year, and the tax savings or tax advantages really helped me out, really cut down. I actually went from owing the government money to them owing me money, which is really great. So I'd probably go with the profit centers piece. That just reiterating that was really good for me.
That's huge, man. You did something great, which was to send me a video just in case you couldn't make it today, man. So I really, really appreciate how dutiful that was, but I'm glad we got to have you here in person. Anything else, man? Any other thing you want to share?
I mean, the other intangible from the event is just being around that many like-minded people. It's the energy of the event, people, clapping and dancing and the smiles on everybody's face. It helps me to take that back to New Orleans with me with that renewed energy, just to be able to help me pump my business to the next level, finishing 2022 strong and have such a positive outlook and ready to take on 2023. I'm already ready setting my quarterly goals for next year. And I'm ready just to keep moving forward with everything.
There you go, man. Drop the mic. I love that energy, Jeff. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on, man. I love getting to connect with you in person. Can you tell people what you think of my karaoke performance just real quick before we move on to Vera?
He is a karaoke monster. This guy ever comes to your city, you take him to karaoke, he's gonna blow it away.
Boom. Listen to Jeff. Don't listen to me. Listen to Jeff. All right, brother. Thanks for coming on, man.
All right, glad to be here.
Speaking of another great smile, Vera Copeland, we got to meet. I think it was the first night after we spoke. You came up to me, we chatted it up, and since then we kept it going. I appreciate you being here, Vera.
Well, awesome. So one of the takeaways was how energetic this guy is in person, even more so than on the podcast. So I appreciate that. But kind of some of the big takeaways for me were definitely some of the things you guys already talked about. But when we're talking about the 5Xing your portfolio, I'd forgotten about that C3X spreadsheet. And I was like, oh my God, because I've been thinking about I need to buy another rental. And I was like, I need to figure out where I'm going to get some more down payment money. And it dawned on me, now I need to go take a look at that because I can probably pull some equity out one of the other properties to be able to buy another property. Let's see. One of the other things, another big takeaway for me was the 1031 exchange. I'd forgotten about that. And when I sold one of my properties, I missed my opportunity. So that kind of came back to me. And another thing is I want to eventually get into the commercial space, the triple net leases. That's a biggie for me. So basically with the triple net, if you buy a restaurant or whatever, and they're going to pay all the taxes, they're going to pay all the insurance, and they're going to pay out, they're going to maintain the property. So basically you're just going to get a check. And so that's something that I'm definitely looking into. And basically overall, it just helped me re-energize and refocus to get ready for next year.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And you know what? There's never one of the big takeaways that I had, right? Because I mean, you know, you saw our presentation there, and we spoke for like 45 minutes on the 5 profit centers. And the whole time I was there like, is this even valuable to people? Because we talk about it so much, but what I've realized is that, thank you. What I've realized is that reiterating this stuff, whether it's the 5 profit centers or the C3X, right? This idea, we've had shows on how if you have multiple properties, there's a spreadsheet that can help you figure out which property to pay down first. And if you figure that out correctly, you gain equity much quicker and you're able to get to those infinite returns much faster. And that if you're a JWB investor, that's something that your portfolio manager can do. If you're a Fortune Builder student, they give you the spreadsheet themselves. To me, that's such like a common thing, yet being able to reiterate it all, I realize that people get a lot of value out of that stuff. So thanks for bringing that back up. The 1031, right? The idea that if you're ready to liquidate a property, to make sure that, what is it? Is it like 45 days that you'd have to have it locked in? So you got to have that planned?
Yep, 45 days. And I believe you have, I think 90 days after that to close, or I think it was 90 days, but I missed that opportunity when I sold a property. And I was like, right after I did, I was like, oh my God, I forgot, but I won't forget again. I can tell you that.
There you go. There you go. That's awesome, Vera. And then finally, the triple net, just to clarify for everybody, if you're getting into the commercial space, leases are a little bit different over there, right? Like you're able to get a commercial property and essentially you just collect rent. The commercial tenant in some commercial leases, which are these triple net ones, are in charge of all the upkeep. They're in charge of all the utilities and they're in charge of all the taxes and everything. You're basically just collecting rent. I think that that's a big, I was in the commercial construction space, so I knew about that stuff, but I would assume that as a residential real estate investor, that's a big eye opener once you can step up into that game as well.
Yes. I mean, it just helps you expand your portfolio, which I mean, I'm always going to keep single family, but I also want to expand in the commercial area.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome, Vera. Well, I really, I appreciate you making time for coming on. I loved meeting you. I love your energy as well.
Same here.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care. All right. Another past star here, Leslie, who has been with us for the fan appreciation shows. Leslie, have you done a property of the week show or not?
No, not yet, because I just acquired 5 properties last year. So they need time to perform for a whole year.
Got it. I got you. Yeah. You know what, Leslie, to me, I'm just gonna, I don't know. What I'll never forget when you came on during the fan appreciation show is this idea that you felt validated by being a female investor that is in charge of stuff. And you felt like when you were in other rooms that folks were just kind of like, no, who's really, it really blew my mind, right? When you said that thing, that as a female, that you don't get treated equally sometimes in certain rooms. And this was a room that you felt that was happening. I'll never forget that. That's really, really special to me. So I really appreciate you kind of like bringing that up when you were the first time that you came on. And now I'm looking forward to hear what else you got.
Well, it's interesting being a female real estate investor, because a lot of the contractors, even real estate agents, they have a tendency, what I call, to little lady me. You know, oh, don't worry your pretty little head, little lady. I'll take care of that for you. And they'll try to distract you so that they take advantage of you, quite honestly. So that's also a shout out to Fortune Builders, because they really train you on how to negotiate, what to look for, what contracts you need to have in place. Unfortunately, at this conference, I caught a really bad cold, and we had to sign a paper saying that, you know, if we had any symptoms, we would isolate. So after the first night, when I woke up with a sore throat the next day, I spent most of the conference in my room. But the one thing that they had at this Ignite that they had at other ones that really, I think, is a great takeaway is the session between Than and Andy Tanner on negotiation, where you have the stimulus and response. And Andy Tanner he'll get a volunteer from the audience, he'll bring him up on stage, and he'll reach out his hand. And the audience member will reach his hand out to shake it. And that's a great example of a stimulus, the outreached hand, and then the response, the volunteer shaking his hand. And in our real estate investing career, we can practice and role play the outcomes that we want and set up that same kind of stimulus and response. And so that was my biggest takeaway from Ignite, I think.
Oh, man, I heard so much about that Andy Tanner session. Andy, who's been on the show, was a dynamo. I remember like talking to people and being like, you can't miss Andy Tanner. And then I missed this session because I had something come up. So I really appreciate that. So he was talking about, I think the title was like using persuasion in your like negotiations or something like that, right? So the idea that you can incite a response with someone, that's one of them. And he showed it by the handshake. How does that contextualize to like deal making outside of just like extending a hand?
Well, it helps you prepare for these meetings, and it helps you in every aspect of your life. Earlier, Than would talk about, this is like his secret power, and he can negotiate with his wife even when he wants her to pick a certain outcome. It's all in how you set up the choices and being aware of what your stimulus is and then the desired outcome that you have. Also, like in negotiation, you have to figure out, when you probe around, and a lot of times you just do this in conversation, but you can figure out what the other person's deal breakers are and then address those right straight away, so that you reduce the tension. A lot of times we just walk around communicating and we're unaware of our effect on other people. And so this just kind of brings a new awareness when you think about everything that you do is a stimulus, and then what is the desired outcome that you want from the other person. Very similar to that handshake. If you reach out your hand, we're just conditioned to reach out our hand and shake hands. And similarly, in any kind of communication, it's that automatic of a response if you're thoughtful about what your action or your part of it is.
Such good stuff, Leslie. Yeah. As a behavior nerd, right? Like I love that stuff. Really good book on that called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I don't know if you've ever read that, but that's one of those books that I immediately read. And I was like, oh, now I'm talking to my wife like this. And then there's another good book called Influence by Robert Cialdini that talks about a lot of these levers of influence, if you like that stuff as well. And then it's like these 7 different levers, but really appreciate this stuff. I love the personal development side of real estate. And I feel like we could talk about that more on the show. And this is a great one of these like life skills that you get to do by doing this awesome stuff. So thanks a million for coming.
It's my pleasure.
Leslie. Yeah, great having you. All right, up next, I'm going to bring on a guy. You have not met him. He is new to our community, but I had the privilege to go to lunch with him at one point. And I learned a few things about Airbnb and the profitability of Airbnb and scaling that business from this gentleman, Kyle Barton, who is a super nice guy. We had a really, really good time. That lunch was one of my big highlights, man. Kyle, I'm really, really pumped that you made some time to come on here and share with our community, man.
Hey, Pablo, thanks for having me. I would say my main takeaway is if you're ever in a different city with Pablo, bring your walking shoes and make sure you're in shape, because he will drag you across town, walking across town, to go find the best restaurants. And that's
A
what we did.
little bit of an exaggeration. It was about a 10-minute walk, bro.
Okay, well, it felt like forever.
But the restaurant
was
was good, right? Am I right?
it was totally worth it. The company was great. Had
Awesome.
some great conversations. So it was a good time.
I appreciate that, man.
Okay, so I had a few of them. The first one, very simple. Get your name on as many titles of properties as possible. Real estate has been a proven investment for years and years and years. And getting your name on titles is going to generate wealth for you. It may not be a quick way of accumulating wealth, but it's a sure way of accumulating wealth. So get your name on titles. A couple other things I wanted to share, not to toot your own horn here, but this came from yours and Greg's presentation, Pablo. But for long-term hold, when you're holding a property, 60 to 80% of the return comes from the appreciation. So picking the right appreciating market is going to be key to a high return portfolio strategy. And then the last thing, it was from the Fortune Builders panel when they brought all the founders up, and they were talking about making decisions in an uncertain environment, like not knowing what's going on. And they said that the two key things during times of uncertainty are education and information. And if you can gather as much information and educate yourself on whatever the topic is that you're not sure about, that's going to give you the confidence that you need to make a decision moving forward. So one example, I woke up this morning, flip on my phone, of course, and I see all these Jeff Bezos says we're coming into this deep recession, like prepare yourself, and recession. And like it initiates fear into you. But then you look back and you're like, okay, what did I just learn over the weekend? Well, I learned that in 5 of the last 6 recessions, real estate values actually went up. So what am I actually, like, what is the fear that I'm feeling? Like, let's go back to the information and the education that I have and make decisions to go and tackle this recession in a profitable way.
So valuable, man. Yeah, super, super valuable, right? We talk about that a lot in our, we do this segment called Not Your Average Insights, where we're kind of breaking down what national headlines are saying versus what the data is saying and stuff like that on this show. And we've been hitting on that a lot, man. That's a really, really good insight. Kyle, I got to say, man, one of the biggest takeaways that I got this weekend was picking your brain about Airbnbs. And I know that our community here, we're all long-term buy and hold investors, but I know a lot of people, they also are curious about short-term rentals and stuff like that. And you shared a major nugget for me that was, and I actually remember I told you I have my own show on Mondays. I shared this yesterday in my own show, but it's the idea that when you went into the markets that you went into, you didn't just go in like, all right, where can I find the best property or whatever? You did a competitive analysis of what are the homes and what are the properties that are doing the best. And from there, you adjusted your strategy towards it. And one of the things that you found was this idea that putting murals in the rooms and making them themed makes the properties perform the best. Those are like the ones that outperform everybody else because people are looking for this experience. You want to kind of tell the audience a little bit about kind of your Airbnb experiences and any other kind of golden nuggets you might have?
Yeah. So we have a portfolio of about 15 Airbnb properties, most down in Florida. And we've kind of coined the term extreme themed Airbnbs, where like in the Orlando market, we brought in like theme park contractors. So we paint murals on every wall. We have 3D elements on all the beds. We have fire breathing dragons or, fog coming out in a swamp room, to go along with the different themes. And the reason we do that, and I think this is what you're referring to, Pablo, is when you look at the revenue curve of properties in a market for vacation rentals, the top 10% performing properties are making exponentially higher returns than the remaining 90% of properties in that market. And so we can double or even more than double the revenue that a property will produce if we can be in that top 10% for not that much more of an investment to put like the amenities or, the different theming elements that we put in. And so that's kind of our strategy going in is what do we need to do to be a top 10% performing property in that market? And then we go and do it better than anyone else.
Love that, man. Love that. It brings me back to kind of when we talk about JWB's data flywheel of the 4,600 properties I have here, and how there's all these misconceptions of what drives value for a long-term rental property, whether it's curb appeal or all these other things that you can invest in that don't really drive value. One of the most counterintuitive ones that JWB has found is that in their property management company, they don't do scheduled routine inspections. They found that that does not drive value. Instead, they devote all the resources to when the property is being turned, having somebody after every single showing, that actually increases ROI versus the idea that if your tenants know that you're coming, they can hide whatever thing they're worried you're going to find. And that's what they put value in. So I love your kind of data-driven market intelligence of what you're doing on the Airbnb side. Really, really hits home, man. Very cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Pablo.
Awesome, bud. Well, thanks for making time for being with us, and hope you become a regular here and be a part of the community. And if anybody needs Airbnb advice or whatever, check out what Kyle is up to, man, because it's a really good, I was already on your website looking at those properties in Destin to take my wife. So we're going to go check that out.
Good deal. Sounds great. Thanks, Pablo.
All right, man. Thanks for coming. Next is a name that I think you're mostly familiar with. And if you're not familiar with him, then you're definitely familiar with Milipitas, California, which is the place that I most like to mispronounce. Louis Hudnall from Milipitas, California. I ran into Louis as I was leaving. He was in full head to toe Steelers garb, looking at his team. It was awesome, man. It was great to see you and your wife all 3 days there. Thanks for being on the show, man.
Likewise, it was great meeting you and Greg in person. Just sort of like Brandon was saying. I mean, I'm a Real Estate Ignite veteran. I've been there in person 3 times, but then obviously the last 2 years were virtual, and I did really feel something different this time going in person because it's been so long. And yeah, getting to meet the celebrities here, you and Greg, it was a great experience.
Celebrities. Man, it's really great to connect with the folks that this is something as a podcaster I've experienced a lot over the last 2 years, right? After COVID, the world opened back up. This idea of being in the same room with people that you've been in Zoom rooms with constantly for the last couple of months, it really shows the idea that digital relationships are very, very real. And the moment that you're in person, it just magnifies everything, man. So right back at you and Leslie and Joel and Jeff and everybody that we got to meet for the first time. But what was your, do you have any kind of takeaways that you learned this weekend that you want to share?
I do. I'm just going to kind of go down my list and just kind of pick out 5 that kind of jumped out at me. So right off the bat in the welcome session, Paul Asajan, I think he wrote on the board, goals, commitment, and discipline. And I don't know, it just kind of really resonated with me because I think about those 3 concepts all the time. And it really sort of drives everything that I do, both personally, professionally, and in the realm of real estate. So him kind of highlighting that right off the bat just kind of got me, right from the beginning focused on what I needed to do at the conference. Second one comes from your session. You guys were up day 1. I think there was a question kind of in the Q&A period about multifam versus single fam. And Greg gave an answer about why you don't necessarily need to consider multifam. You can kind of still achieve the same sort of returns and results from just having multiple single fams. And I thought that was a great insight because that's kind of how I had been kind of thinking about it. I know that down in Florida, there's 2 families. I've seen 2 family, rentals, 3 family rentals, quads. And I'm always like, well, why do that when I can just get 4 singles, and that's essentially what Greg said. So I thought, the way he explained it was, kind of confirmed how I was thinking about it. So I thought that was good.
Do you remember why he said that it was valuable? Do you remember what he was talking about?
The one thing that really stood out to me was exit strategy, because even though in the passive income game, you want to hold these, like he says, for a full market cycle, 10 years plus, but when it does come time to sell, for example, in the Paul Shively session where, he sold his dad's house, you want to be able to sell the house, right? You need to be able to make that sale happen. And not everyone out there is looking for quads, right? I think there's a much healthier market for single fam. And so even though that decision point may be further down the line for you, still thinking about it ahead of time will set you up for that transaction. So when Greg said, the exit strategy piece of it, that was kind of really how I also had thought about it. So I'm glad I'm on the right path, I guess.
Yeah, me too, man. So that came from I met another gentleman named Lee on the Thursday before not Lee Bishop, our famous MVP here, but like I met him on the Thursday before the show, and I was kind of talking to him about multifamily versus single family. And I heard a couple of people bring up that multifamily because people are trying to hedge the risk of vacancy, right? So like thinking if you have a threeplex or a fourplex and one isn't rented and the other ones are paying for it. And I remember as Greg showed up to Vegas, I was like, hey man, what is the answer to this? And he's like, why don't we just talk about it on the talk tomorrow, which I thought was a great idea. But yeah, to your point, man, I then got asked about that a lot. And while I like the exit strategy part of it too, the other thing that became apparent to me as I talked through it to people is I would not have been where I am at now with 3 properties if I was waiting to get a multifamily, right? So kind of like what we talked with Brandon about of just like getting on base, it was really crucial for me to buy that first one and then figure out how to buy the second one and then figure out how to buy the third one instead of trying to like save up all this, like this bigger sum of money to try to get a multifamily. I would have lost out on time and market. I would have lost out on, the interest rates that I got early on. And I thought that was really interesting. It's the idea that if you buy 3 to 4 homes and you figure out how to acquire them in the next like 2 to 3 years, it is like getting a multifamily from the diversification of risk perspective, but it has the exit strategy. And on top of that, you're almost like dollar costing into the market the same way that you do with other asset classes, man. So yeah, I thought that was great, man. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And you can get in easier, right? Because your down payment's lower. You can get in easier and get out easier with the single fam. Your down payment's lower. And then, like I said, more buyers in the single fam market than the multifam market.
Totally, man. You got some more?
I do. Day 2, I went to the business growth strategies one. This was the panel with all the Fortune Builder founders. They had the gentleman from their commercial partner, but he said that a lot of the conversation in that session was about, sort of personal improvement. They talked about surrounding yourself with people smarter than you and joining masterminds and all that stuff. But the one thing that this gentleman said was that he does this like personal challenge every year. Like he identifies a personal challenge for him. I think it was, I don't know if it was like running a triathlon or something crazy that
It was an Ironman, right? He did an Ironman.
An Ironman, something like that. I was like, and he said that doing that personal challenge helps him become a better business person. And I thought that was really interesting because I'd never really sort of put those two together. I sort of think of them as separate compartments, but he puts that personal challenge out for himself every single year. And, again, that helps him become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that applies to, everything that he does. And so that might be something I'll try to implement for myself in 2023. I'm not jumping off any bridges or, out of airplanes or whatever, doing Ironmans, but I'll find something that'll push me and hopefully that'll, yield results in other areas that I'm, focus my attention on.
I love that, man. I love the personal development side of this stuff. I had heard about that stuff from a guy called Jesse Itzler. He's the owner of the Hawks, and he's a billionaire because he flipped a couple companies to like Berkshire Hathaway and Pepsi. And he talks about that. It's like an old Japanese ritual. There's a word for it. It's like the ikigai or something like that. You set up like a big personal challenge every single year. And like you said, it helps you be better at everything else because you're training yourself to be uncomfortable, to be comfortable in discomfort, and that allows you to grow better. Good stuff, man.
So let's see here. Number 4, this was kind of what I was really going to the conference for. And I kind of got it in a session. I wasn't really expecting to get it. I went to the EXP session, and the speaker there mentioned a book called Who Not How. And I needed to hear that because my day job, not my real estate job, but my day job as an attorney, I've got some definite who versus how problems. And so I'm all excited about, putting this book on my Christmas list and getting it. Generally, the concept is when you have pain points in your business, you don't want to think about how you solve it. You want to think about who can solve that problem for you, because there's going to be someone out there more skilled than you, who's better situated, that you can plug in and come in and address that problem more immediately than you trying to figure out how to do it. And that comes up in my day job, that comes up in real estate. And so I really want to dive into this book and just kind of get focused on, solving my how problems with who. So that was a big one for me.
Man, I love that. Yeah, that's Dan Sullivan, man. You're gonna like his stuff, man. He's the head of like a organization called Strategic Coach, which I've heard is like the best entrepreneurs mastermind there is out there from multiple people. I think you're gonna like eating up that food chain. But yeah, man, that really reminds me of what we talk about here, where people think that it's go find a property and then see who can manage it or whatever, when it's really go find the team first. And then you can figure out whatever else you need to do, right? Like to the who, not the how. Love that, man. Good stuff.
Yeah, and when I think about it, like I feel like that's exactly what I did with JWB, right? I mean, I've never been to Jacksonville. I've never seen the properties that I own, but I've got the team and it works, and it's low headache and high return, and that's how I like it. That's what passive investing is supposed to be. So yeah, definitely who, not how. Number 5, I forget the gentleman's name you just had on here, but I think you already touched on it. This came from the Paul Sively 5X session. Clarity of investment objective equals clarity of action. I love that. The way it sort of hit me was like, a lot of times there's like hesitation in terms of investing. Like, I don't know if I should do this or that, or, go here or there. Like, you've got to have that first step, that clarity of your objective. Like, what do you want to accomplish? Once you have that, it's so much easier to take action in that direction when it comes to your investments. And so I like having these little, just quick quotes just to kind of get your mind right in terms, and apply it to certain things. And when Shively said that, I love listening to Paul Shively all the time. I mean, he has some great stuff, but that clarity of investment objection equals clarity of action. That was a day 3 concept. That was a great way to finish it up, for me.
Lewis, man, like a great attorney, you were fully prepared for this court, man. That's really impressive how you showed up. I'm glad we finished with you, man, because you had that really well constructed top 5 takeaways. Really, really enjoyed it, man. Great meeting you. And thanks for making time, man. I really appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So that was a new content format that we haven't really done here before. Like I said, I've done this a couple of times on my own podcast, and I was telling GC, I was like, hey, man, we had this other show planned for today. And I'm like, why don't we try this? I feel like we're going to talk to enough interesting people at Fortune Builders. I think our community is going to be there. I think they're going to be into it. So I'm getting great reviews here in the chat from everybody, but we really couldn't do this if you weren't here, right? Like, could not do this if we didn't have this community to then go plug into at Fortune Builders. If we didn't have you in the chat, if we didn't have people making the extra time to connect with each other and making this thing real. So I just really, really want to thank you for being here, taking an hour of your day in the middle of a Tuesday to come hang out and add value to the equation and to my life. I just really, really appreciate you all. If you're listening to this on the podcast or in the YouTube in the near future, go to nyais.com. Join us here live. We're going to post-produce all these little content segments, but I hope to see you on Thursday for the POTW, the JWB week, where we're going to dive into a property and go into the numbers and take your questions specifically, and you get to see the JWB inventory. But until then, right, like, listen to these pieces of advice. Surround yourself with great people. Know your why. Think of your who, not your how. Remember the rule of 72. And more than anything, just don't be average. See you next time.